Maria here. Thanks for joining me for BTN. Coming up today, we celebrate International Women's Day with a look at some inspirational women and the new podcast that honours them. Travel back 40 years to find out why Mardi Gras actually started as a protest. And we'll take you to the racetrack to find out what it's like to be a V8 supercar driver. All that and more soon. But first, last week we told you about Australia's new Deputy PM, Michael McCormack. He was voted in as the leader of the Nationals, which automatically gave him the deputy gig. But why? Well, it's all got to do with a secret agreement first struck nearly 100 years ago. Take a look.
Labor would not provide it.
He's got the most important job in these here parts. The Prime Minister. But the PM's not in it alone. He's got a very important sidekick who can step in. The Deputy. When the PM's away or can't do his job for some reason, this guy puts his boots on and saddles up. They both have a big job to do, so they have to work well together. But did you know they actually come from different political parties? The PM, Malcolm Turnbull, is the leader of the Liberal Party. His deputy, Michael McCormack, is the leader of the National Party. But each day they work together as part of a team called the Coalition. A coalition is when political parties agree to team up and hopefully win a bigger share of the votes in an election than if they were just standing on their own, which in turn makes them more likely to be able to win and form government. Usually they have a pretty similar idea on how things should be run, and while both parties stay separate and do have different views on some issues, they share enough similarities to be able to compromise. You can't just make up a coalition as you go along. You need to go into it with a pretty solid agreement about how it will operate.
Mr. Speaker, of course I agree that...
For example, nationally, the Liberal Party earns a bigger chunk of votes. So, as part of their agreement, the Prime Minister is selected from the Liberals, while the Deputy comes from the Nationals. Think of it like dividing up the spoils. But the rest of their agreement is actually secret, so we don't know what's in there, despite pressure from other pollies.
It would be a very good start for him to do what Barnaby Joyce wasn't prepared to do, and that is share the arrangements with Malcolm Turnbull with the Australian people.
The deal between these two parties goes back a long way. The National Party of Australia started in 1920, but back then it was called the Country Party, and it was all about representing the views of Aussies living outside of cities. They focused on supporting farmers and other industries like mining. But after an election in 1922, the Country Party agreed to team up with another party to help form government. That party would later become the Liberals, and the rest is history, except for all the times they've split and then got back together since then. Lately though, things have been pretty solid, and the Liberal and National parties have worked together to bring law to this tumbleweed town called Australia. And while it's been a bit of a bumpy road, this partnership is here to stay, no matter who gets to wear the badges. Have you got a question about the Coalition? Ask me live on Friday during Ask a Reporter. Head to our website for all the details.
First up to Tasmania, where voters have re-elected the Liberal Party. Will Hodgman will stay on as the state's Premier.
And tonight, Tasmanians are giving us the honour and the responsibility of delivering for the next 4 years.
So far, the Liberal Party has won 13 seats in Parliament, while Labor's got 9 and the Greens have 1. Astronomers say they've picked up a tiny signal from some of the oldest stars ever discovered. They say the stars were formed around 180 million years after the Big Bang. That might sound like a really long time, but considering the universe is 13 billion years old, they're actually quite young. Astronomers say the stars were some of the first to light up the universe. They spotted them using this tiny receiver in Western Australia, which was built to look for radiation left over from the Big Bang. Scientists say the early stars absorbed some of that radiation, and that's how they found them. It was incredibly difficult though. They say it was a bit like hearing the wings of a hummingbird in the middle of a hurricane. Overseas, a superstorm has covered parts of Europe in a fluffy blanket of snow. They're calling the storm the Beast from the East, and while it made some areas look like a fairy tale, it's also freezing train lines, causing flight cancellations and shutting down 500 schools in the UK. And while humans in Europe are shivering through the extreme cold, these guys are having a great time. They're Baltic seals, and their thick, fatty tissue keeps them nice and warm in the icy weather, although frozen whiskers can't be too comfortable. And finally, to Hollywood's Night of Nights. On Monday, some of the biggest film stars in the world battled it out at the 90th Academy Awards. Coco took out Best Animation. Meanwhile, Best Actress went to Frances McDormand for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and Gary Oldman took out Best Actor for Darkest Hour. But the biggest award of the night, Best Picture, went to The Shape of Water. The 8th of March is International Women's Day. So next, we're going to give you some inspirational stories to help you mark the day. We'll also tell you why the fight for equality is far from over. Take a look. Throughout history, let's make that herstory. There have been some very impressive women who have achieved some very impressive things. Think Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Amelia Earhart, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And Marie Curie, a physicist who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. March 8th is International Women's Day, a day to celebrate the great achievements of women everywhere, which is why the ABC is releasing a new podcast series called Fierce Girls.
Jessica survived and started again and sailed into the sun.
It celebrates some amazing Aussie women, from Jessica Watson, who sailed around the world all by herself when she was only 16, to Ronnie Khan, the founder of food rescue charity Oz Harvest, and Paralympic gold medalist Louise Savage. Here's part of her story, voiced by surfing world champion Stephanie Gilmore.
What's wrong with her? The nosy lady gawked at the girl with the metal things on her legs. The girl frowned. There's nothing wrong with me. That's right, said her mum. You're a champion. Louise Savage was born with one leg bent underneath her body and the other almost touching her shoulder. She couldn't walk properly. But when she tried wheelchair racing, it was love at first roll. And she was fast as a road runner. She won race after race and was chosen to compete in a demonstration of her sport at the Sydney Olympics. The gun blasted and Louise pumped her arms. More than 100,000 people rose to their feet. Louise pushed and pushed. She crossed the line and raised her arms in victory. Yet on the podium, she noticed her medal was smaller than the others. For a moment, Louise doubted herself. Then the crowd roared again. She realised she was a real Olympian in the eyes of the people who really mattered. There was nothing wrong with Louise Savage. She was a champion, and she just won gold at the Olympics.
International Women's Day isn't just about celebrating great achievements like Louise's. It was also set up by the UN to help bring attention to the issues still faced by women all around the world. Around 60 million girls still don't have access to a good education. In many places, women face discrimination and violence. And on average, they still earn less money than men doing the same role. Fewer women run big companies or sit in parliament, and men are more likely to get promoted. But the UN says that by working together and celebrating the achievements women have already made, we can all look forward to a more equal future. And if you liked Louisa's story, you can hear heaps more just like it on the Fierce Girls podcast. Subscribe to it now on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. Now it's time for our first quiz. What year were women given the right to vote in Australia? Was it 1802, 1902 or 2002? The answer is 1902. Okay, next up, we're taking a look at a celebration attended by hundreds of thousands of people each year. And this year, it celebrated its 40th birthday. But how did the Mardi Gras festival actually begin? Take a look.
Mardi Gras is a beautiful thing. It's inclusive, it's flamboyant, it's crazy.
Mardi Gras is
acceptance, inclusive,
loud, sparkly and equal. We have Mardi Gras because we're celebrating gay and lesbian people.
I think Mardi Gras is important because it allows people to really be themselves.
Mardi Gras is family.
and it's a day where we are accepted as regular people. Not that we already aren't.
Over the weekend, hundreds of thousands of people sashayed their way to Sydney to celebrate the 40th Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. There were floats, dancing, music, and of course, plenty of glitter. It's one of the biggest celebrations of the year for this community, but it actually started as a big protest way back in the 1970s.
2, 4, 6, 8, gay is just as good as straight.
Back then, it was illegal for men and women to be openly gay in New South Wales.
In 78, male homosexuality was still illegal. Homosexual people could legally be discriminated against in terms of jobs, education, a whole range of things.
So, on the 24th of June, 1978, hundreds of people, known today as the 78ers, took to Oxford Street in Sydney to protest that law. But it quickly turned violent. Police took over the lead float and arrested 53 men and women.
I got a dustbin lid thrown in my back, I knew because it really, really hurt. And then some big buffy blokes, police picked me, and then I had other people trying to save me, and my glasses got lost, and I got literally thrown into a paddy wagon.
Afterward, the Sydney Morning Herald posted the names of all the people arrested. And as a result, many lost their jobs, and some were even kicked out of home. The next year, the New South Wales government changed these laws, and around 3,000 people turned out to show their support.
Police reported no trouble during today's march.
Over the years, Mardi Gras has transformed from a protest to a parade, with floats, costumes and performances, each year reflecting on the progress this community has made in their fight for equality.
The entire difference between now versus back then is so huge, so I think we enormously owe them a debt and just need to hear their stories and what it was like.
And in 2016, the New South Wales Government, Police and Sydney Morning Herald apologised for how they treated the 78ers.
For the mistreatment you suffered that evening as a member of this Parliament who oversaw the events of that night, I apologise and I say sorry.
Today, police and politicians get involved in Mardi Gras, along with lots of other community groups and businesses. And as Mardi Gras grows, it continues to celebrate a push for equality that started 40 years ago.
Happy Mardi Gras! Happy Mardi Gras! Happy Mardi Gras! Happy Mardi
Dingoes can get a bad rap from farmers for hunting their livestock, but a new study has found that they can sometimes be heroes too. Here's the story.
Dingoes are one of Australia's favourite animals. Alongside other true blue characters like kangaroos, echidnas and platypuses, they've been given pride of place as one of our country's most iconic creatures. But what makes dingoes so special? Aren't they just orange dogs? They do look a lot like the family pets we have at home. And a lot of domestic dogs here in Australia do actually have dingo blood in them, but the two are very different. Firstly, dogs bark and dingoes don't. They mainly use growling to communicate. And while man's best friend can be domesticated or taught tricks, purebred dingoes can't. The dingo is unique to Australia and lives in every state and territory except Tasmania. Dingoes are classed as a vulnerable species, but to some farmers in Australia, they're seen as a pest because they attack livestock like sheep. There are long fences in parts of the country designed to keep dingoes out of certain areas. Farmers also set traps to catch them and sometimes poison them if they venture too close to farms. But while dingoes might be a nuisance for some farmers, a new study has found they can also act as an important guardian for native Aussie wildlife. Here's how that happens. Dingoes love dry, open areas, mainly because they make for great kangaroo hunting grounds, so they tend to gather in places recently hit by bushfires. The increase in dingo numbers means animals like foxes and cats tend to stay away. So the smaller native species they'd usually be catching and eating are left alone. And that's a pretty big deal, because introduced animals like foxes and cats are a massive threat to native animals. It's estimated feral cats alone kill around 20 billion native animals per year. So anything that scares them away can make a big difference. This discovery is really interesting because it reminds us that animals like our iconic dingo are part of a complex and ever-changing ecosystem.
Are dingoes carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores? The answer is omnivores. They've been known to eat berries and other fruit as well as meat. "70 swimmers have been selected to represent Australia at next month's Commonwealth Games. And in a funny coincidence, there are 3 sets of siblings in the team, including Kate Campbell and her younger sister Bronte, and Emma and David McKeon. There are also 21 para-athletes, including Australia's youngest swimmer, 13-year-old Jasmine Greenwood. Holden driver Shane Van Gisbergen has dominated at this year's Adelaide 500, cleaning up in both races.
He makes the big lunge down the inside and he's going to park it there. He's got it done.
It's Van Gisbergen's second Adelaide 500 win in a row. Aussie surfer Mick Fanning's announced he'll hang up his wetsuit at the end of the month.
It's something I've been thinking about for a few years now, and I just feel like I just sort of have lost the drive to compete day in, day out.
The guy's a 3-time world champion, but says he'll be retiring for good after the Bells Beach Pro at the end of March. In Japan, the mascots for the 2020 Olympics have been picked by kids. Students from more than 200,000 classes voted for the ones they liked best, and these were the winners. What's so great about them? Well, it turns out they have superpowers. They can teleport and move objects with their mind, something that would probably be cheating if they were actual competitors at the Games. And finally, the NBL finals are underway, and the Adelaide 36ers are off to a good start, thrashing the Perth Wildcats by 35 in the first of their 3-game semi-final series.
Knocks down another 3.
feels great, to come out here and play like this in front of our home fans. We really set the tone early, and Sophie got going in that fourth quarter, and it was a great team win.
But the 36ers weren't quite as impressive earlier in the week when they took some time out at training to get hypnotised, forgetting their own names and getting calls on a shoe phone. Looks like their teammates had a ball watching from the sidelines. Finally today, as you saw there, the 2018 V8 Supercar Series kicked off this weekend. But before the drivers could hit the track, they took part in a junior press conference where they were grilled by school kids. We tagged along to find out how these rookie reporters went interviewing V8 racing stars.
Racing around city streets at nearly 300 km per hour involves some serious skill, control, and even a bit of daring. That's something these guys know a fair bit about. They're supercar drivers, and ahead of the Adelaide 500, they're giving school kids the opportunity to ask them how it's done.
How did you become a professional supercar driver?
For us, all of us started in go-karting, and then it's like any sport. You start, you do it very regularly, you get better and better at it. I did it because I loved it. I never looked at it as this is what's going to pay my bills when I'm older, but I wanted to keep racing for as long as I possibly could.
How hot does it get when you're driving in the car?
It gets very hot. It varies a lot depending on the weekend and depending on the temperature outside. But like Mark said, it's like getting in your car on a very hot day wrapped up in blankets. It's just not very pleasant.
How often do you train your driving skills?
There's a lot of other things you can do off track, like computer games. There's a big simulator you sit in, which makes you feel like you're driving a car to a point. Yeah, other people have go-karts. Just all little bits and pieces that we try and do.
Down the inside to the lead.
What have you learned from the drivers today?
Well, mainly I learned that it's pretty tough and it's fun, and when you're in the car, like, it gets really hot because they don't have air conditioning.
I pretty much learned that it is more hard for them than I actually thought it was to get in a car and drive.
But what happens in the driver's seat is just one part of racing. Inside this garage, a whole team of people is working on this car to make sure it runs at its absolute best on race day. Driver Lee has to work closely with race engineer Stu, both to make tiny tweaks to improve the car's performance and to plan race strategies.
There's a huge amount of work that needs to go into the car in preparation. A lot of it's just general maintenance, but also a lot of it is development as well, because basically if we just turned up each race meeting with the same components, we'd actually just be going backwards.
How stressful is it during the race?
I've been outside the car. It's more stressful outside the car, I reckon.
Yeah,
I see these guys have got so much information to process at the one time. We do it also in the car, but at least we're concentrating on, just driving the car as quick as you can.
The mechanics also, when the car comes in for a pit stop, they've got to put the fuel in, change the wheels as quickly as they can, and so for them that's a pretty high adrenaline sort of moment as well.
So it's definitely a team effort, and a chance for these guys to learn what it's like if they ever want to hit the track.
I'm probably not going to race cars myself, but I just like watching it.
I'd like to race. I'd like to see how I would go and like to try it.
And that wraps us up for today, but we'd love to hear what you thought about today's stories on our website. While you're there, we'll also have a link on the front page to help you find the Fierce Girls podcast. I'll see you next week for more BTN.